Hi guys, my name is Millie. I currently am a fourth year at Western, class of 2018. I just matched into Loma Linda's interventional radiology program. I wanted to make this video available as an extra resource, so hopefully it's helpful and good luck with everything. So my hope is to help you set yourself up for success. This first part is going to be focused on board examinations. Regardless of what your career goals are, you want to be doing the best that you can on boards. However, if you already know you're interested in specialties like derm, ophtho, surgery, or radiology, there's a little bit more pressure to do well. It's important for you to understand your situation and your career goals. If you are going for a competitive specialty, or if you're wanting to go into academic medicine, you're likely going to need a more competitive score. Western's mission and strength, along with many other osteopathic schools, is geared towards primary care. You'll be placed at a community hospital for rotations, and you'll be set up relatively well for primary care. However, the flip side is, for those of you interested in more competitive specialties or in academic medicine, you're unfortunately at a slight disadvantage and will have more challenges compared to your allopathic counterparts. However, you can still make it happen. So what do residencies look for? Board scores are unfortunately just part of the game that we've signed up to play. They're just the gatekeeper, as some programs use it as a filter when it comes to offering interviews. I will discuss the other important aspects, such as letters of rec, research, and OAs in a separate video. So first off, set goals for yourself. For USMLE, my reachable goal was 230, while my less realistic goal was 250. I picked these values as the average step score for radiology was around 240s. Meanwhile, I was aiming for 600 on COMLEX. Unfortunately, most ACGME programs don't really know how to assess the COMLEX, but still do the best that you can. The main test to focus on is USMLE. This allows programs to compare you to allopathic applicants on the same scoring system. Once I picked my test date, I told myself not to move it. And trust me, the temptation to push back your test date grows towards the end. But since my timeline was set, I knew that I could give it 110% effort and take the test with no regrets, knowing that I gave it my best effort. It's easy to be overwhelmed with having so many different resources available. I mostly used the bolded ones and attempted to go through them multiple times. Pick the resources that you like and stick with them, since everyone learns differently. This is a general timeline I had set up for myself. In retrospect, I got started a little bit too early. I believe most of my peers didn't start until January, but I personally felt like starting earlier allowed me to adjust to the mindset of studying for both classes and boards. The most accurate statement I was told was that you started preparing for your boards since day one of med school. So with that said, I personally started with an extremely light review around November, familiarizing myself with first aid, and gradually I increased the intensity with content review. And by spring break, that's when I started to buckle down and started memorizing content, and by the time I hit dedicated study period, which if I remember correctly was 5 to 6 weeks for me, I was really buckled down. And personally, my goal was to do content review before using up my UWorld questions. And for me, the whole mindset behind it was that with the more content that I had covered, the better I would score. So I structured my study time from November to spring break by systems. I simply divided the number of pages in first aid for that system to figure out how many pages I needed to go through each day. And on top of that, I tried to maximize my meal times by watching Sketchy Medical and listening to Golion when I went to the gym. But definitely, be sure to protect both your board study time and class study time. I cannot emphasize that enough. Do not flake off on your class material because that's the same stuff that's going to be covered on boards. For me, I personally found that having a routine of covering first aid from 8 o'clock to 12 worked well, and then I would use the rest of the time to cover class content. Practice tests are vital to this entire process. I took one at the beginning of dedicated, and for an additional cost, I took another practice test at the same Prometric center I was going to take my actual exam. I personally just wanted to be familiar with the test center so that I wouldn't have to deal with any extra avoidable stress on test day. I took another test 1 and 2 weeks before my test date. I had stacked 2 self-assessments together to simulate a full exam. I personally do not recommend taking any more assessments if you're within a week of test date. You could use the time of 4 hours of life better, focusing on areas of weakness rather than just getting another score estimate, which honestly, at the end of the day, it won't have any impact on your real score anyway. And as for COMLEX, I relied on our WesternU curriculum. After taking step 1, I set aside 1 day to rest and then 3 days to review Savarese, visceral somatics, and Chapman's. During dedicated study period, I wanted to have another pass at first aid.
I attempted to cover that system within these number of days. And this was a breakdown of my study schedule during dedicated period. And yes, of course, I did not completely stick to my plans. By now, you're probably really stressed out with everything that I've told you because my schedule and timelines seem intense. For those of you who are brilliant, you could have likely scored better with less effort. However, I knew myself. I consider myself to be of average med student intelligence, but with a decent work ethic and good test taking ability. I personally needed the structure to help me get through the madness. When comparing USMLE to COMLEX, I felt the USMLE was a more appropriate test, with test questions that had fair content distribution and some random questions. Meanwhile, COMLEX was much more stressful. The first thing I did when I sat down in my test chair was scribble down my visceral somatics and Chapman points. And remember to pace yourself. I easily ran short on time. And the distribution of questions was really based on luck. You could easily get 10 questions on the same topic, and well, hopefully that's just a topic that you're familiar with. So here are some pearls. Put together a study schedule for yourself early on. Pick your test date early, too, as those availabilities disappear quickly. I booked mine in December for a test date in June. Be flexible with your study plans and incorporate some cushion into your schedule to account for breaks and extra time needed to relearn or learn new concepts. And remember, this is a marathon with a sprint at the end. Know how to rest well, know your limits, and schedule in breaks for yourself. I would take at least half a day off each week during dedicated period. I also distributed my time studying with classmates and by myself. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses and study habits, so know what works best for you. As for Step 2 and Level 2, I had a very similar approach. I booked my tests in December for a date in June. I took a month of independent study at the end of third year since my schedule worked out that way. Most of my classmates took their study month at the beginning of fourth year. And ideally, aim for the same, if not a better score, than Step 1. As for COMLEX PE, I scheduled mine in September of third year for a test date in July of fourth year. Remember, you will likely have to fly out for this test, so plan accordingly. I took 3 days to review for the PE, going over different potential case scenarios and basic OMM techniques, such as MFR, soft tissue, and articulatory. The best individuals to ask for advice will likely be those who are 1 year above you, as the process is still fresh in their minds. But feel free to contact me if you would like. Good luck with everything.